think we need a standing ovation for the Yankton Lyonses for bringing us all together. So if you will all stand. Now, while you're still standing, I've got a suggestion. You know, all my life people told me to sit down and shut up. Well, Francis asked me to stand up and say something. I'm at a loss for words. And then I figured out why he wanted me up here. There's an open bar and a bunch of Irishmen, so this is the time you're all supposed to go to the bathroom. By the time you get back, I'll be through. When I came in, I looked up the ceiling to see if there were any hanging fans. One of our shirt-tail relation one time was sipping orange juice in Mom McHale's saloon in Wagner, and some way he got an urge to make a speech or read a passage from the Bible or something. He jumped up on the table, and lo and behold, it was a revelation. His head hit the fan. If you want further information on this, I refer you to Uncle Bob. He was an eyewitness. Later, he went to the state legislature. Well, I'm the youngest son of Dennis B. and Beatrice Pesci Lyons. My father was the oldest son of William and Catherine Lyons, and they were married in 1910, and they immediately went to a homestead in Tripp County, South Dakota, southwest of Winter. Now, Dad and one of his brothers, I'm not sure whether it was Bill or Jerry, and the boss took the wagon and what possessions they had and a few livestock and drove to Dallas, South Dakota, which was that was the end of the line. That was a jumping off place. And Mother went down here to Running Water, where there was a ferry across the Missouri River, and took the train to Dallas. Well, they met there, and they spent the night, and thought they had everything loaded up, and started to the homestead, which was about 50 miles. I mean, nothing. Well, the first thing they discovered that somebody had stole the provisions. They got about 2 miles from Dallas, so they had to go back and buy provisions. Then they started again, and they came to Ponca Creek. Well, they went down over the bank, and the wagon upset with the bride and the whole works. Well, they got her fished out, and they were around in there wallering around trying to get everything loaded up, and they found everything but the lid to the stove. Now, some of you kids don't know what a cook stove is. It's made of cast iron, and the lids come off in sections so you put fuel in. Well, here they are out there going out to Homestead, and there's no place to buy a stove. And they spent most of the day trying to find a stove lid so they could set up housekeeping. But anyway, they finally, and Mother was sitting on the bank telling me what she thought of homesteading. But they progressed on and got to their homestead, and through the trials and tribulations of life, there were 7 of us kids born out there. 4 of them were over there making a lot of noise like a bunch of drunks. There was 2 deceased. My brother Bill is buried in France, and my sister Marge is buried in California. Now, one of the incidents that I would like to mention, of course, there was no schools, no churches or anything out there. And one day Dad was out on the prairie, and this fellow came over the hill with a horse and buggy, and he was all dressed in black and had a beard. And God, Dad thought, I didn't know there's any Mennonites out here. Well, come to find out, it was a Jesuit priest from the St. Francis Mission on the Rosebud Indian Reservation. So Dad chatted with him a while, and he said, you know, there's quite a few Catholics around here, and we really need to have a priest. Well, he said, I'm going down here to a part Indian family about 10 miles east of where the folks lived, and he said, if you will gather the Catholics, I will come back tomorrow and I'll say Mass in your house. So that's what he did. Well, then from time to time, he would come and stay all night someplace, and they would send the word, and the people would gather and have Mass. Now, Jim and Angela, I believe it's right that you kids made your first communion in our house, isn't that right? And several of the neighbor kids.
I served mass too.
Well, then eventually they scared up enough money to build a church. I suppose that was in the late teens. And things went along fairly well. Well, one warm June afternoon, Jim and my brother Bill and Dad and a neighbor and two of his sons were stacking hay out by the church. And there were some other neighbors across the fence cultivating corn. There was probably 4 or 5 of them. And this cloud came up, and they all collected there and were kind of wondering what to do. Well, a tornado tail came out of it. They were all huddled out there by the haystack, and the tornado came through and picked up the church. And as an old neighbor lady used to say, yeah, she said, the Lord picked church up and hit D.B. Lyons over the head with it. Well, D.B., I guess, was a survivor. It smashed the church all to the devil, but he was chopped up pretty bad, but he did survive. They sewed him up. And one neighbor boy had an broken arm. But I remember, I was only 5 years old, but I remember the horses were tied to the fence, and it just rolled them up in the wire. There were dead horses. There was crippled horses. And it was really a sad affair. Well, anyway, that fall, some way they raised enough money to build another church, and this is on Dad's homestead. It's on the ranch that my wife and I live on now, and we still have mass there every other Sunday. Now, next came the dirty 30s, and I mean, it was really bad out there. I mean, like my brother Bob said, you know, we never saw a fat cow or a fat horse till we were 15 years old. And that's the truth, really. It was, I found a check after my father died, a canceled check that my brother Bill had written to a neighbor for a load of thistles in March of 1935 for $10 for a hay rack load of Russian thistles to feed the cattle. And that was it. And another part of that, the government came in and bought these cattle because there was no market for them and they were starving to death. Well, anything that was fit to eat, they shipped to market and butchered. But the condemned ones were shot and shoved into a pit, and that was my father's job. He shot thousands and thousands of those starving cattle in Tripp County. Now, I really don't have too much more to say, I guess, but Mother and I are still out there on the homestead, and we're really not hard to find. If any of you happen out that way, if you can't find the directions, ask Larry and Mary Perko. But you go to winter and go, you head southwest, and when you get halfway to Valentine, Nebraska, you turn right, come down over the hill to the creek, tie the mules to the wagon wheel, and come in across the footbridge. We've usually got a part of the neighbor's steer in the freezer. If you are so inclined, I bring a loaf of bread and a little brown jug, and we'll call in the neighbors and have a doings. Through yet. God, don't stand up unless you got to go to the toilet. There's something here that I would like to read to you. You know, my father wrote a history of Tripp County in 1933. And, oh boy, there's Charlie. Come in here, Charlie. Hey, Charlie, come in here. Your famous cousin is giving a speech. And he's even sober. We'll let Charlie get a drink first. But anyway, this is the closing paragraph that Dad wrote 53 years ago, and I believe that maybe it's as pertinent today as it was then. And this is what he says. Finally, in that ever onward march of time, I find myself almost at the quarter century of the development of this county. With the dreams of 25 years vanished, with fancy's pictures faded, with youth gone and age here, With economic disaster spreading despair in its wake, with drought and grasshoppers making our land uninhabitable, but from the human heart springs hope eternal. And in the active hours of daylight, with sober logic born of experience, I can see again a future, as I know that history has always repeated itself. But in the evening, between the daylight and darkness, when comes that pause in life's occupation, a still voice whispers to me, "Backward, turn backward, O time in your flight." Thank you.
I knew that eloquence existed on the banks of the Kiapaha from having known your father, Dennis, D.B., for many years, and I'm very pleased to see that it continues. And your suggestion of a little break for a few drinks and going to the bathroom was a very good one, and I suggest we do so now. Let us be back in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Fresh, and we will continue. We will now hear from my beautiful cousin, Rosemary Lyons McMullen of Jackson, Mississippi, formerly of Omaha, daughter of Jerry and Rose Lyons. When we were children in our adolescence on the farm, we felt like country mice. Rosemary always made us feel like princes when she visited us on the farm and spread her sophisticated charm from the big city of Omaha upon us. Rosemary, could we now hear from you, please?
And then I moved to Mississippi. And I'm representing Mississippi as well as Jerry's family. Let me say I'm mighty proud to be here. And my whole family would be mighty proud too, and nothing could make me happier than to have had them all here. My father was Jerry, and I just realized today where that Jeremiah came from the original Jeremiah and Ellen. They came over here in 44. I was born in Omaha, Nebraska, raised, educated there, and I had a brother Bob. And I married Jerry. He practiced dentistry there. We all called him Jerry. He was Jeremiah Arthur, and he was a beautiful, wonderful man. I've never gotten over him, but he's not with me anymore. But I married in 50 and moved to Mississippi, and I mean, I moved to Mississippi to a small, small town, and 4 of my children were born there. And then we moved to Jackson. I had my youngest son was born over there. My husband is Pat McMullen, and he's in the banking business. And my oldest daughter, Julia Rose, lives in Jackson, has 5 children, and the 3 little girls you've seen here are hers: Erin Rose, Mary Claire, and Kathleen McMullen Kehoe, and then they have an Andrew and a Will at home. Next is Patrick, whom you met this morning, and he and his wife live in New York. He's in the investment banking business. And they had to leave early to get a plane back. And then Michael is my Lyons. He's Michael Lyons McMullen, and he lives in Austin, Texas now. And he has a Michael Lyons Jr. He has 3 children. And then Mary Charlotte, my daughter from New Orleans, is an attorney there. And then my youngest is Robert Jeremiah. So we kept the names pretty well. And we're also so thrilled to be here, and this is so important to me when you're far away as I am. I love my McMullen family. They're wonderful. It's a great, big, loving, wonderful family. And we have a reunion every year on the 3rd Sunday in August. But my heart just aches to come back up here, and I've cried since I've been here. But I've laughed at the importance of bringing my children up here to see this other very important half of their heritage. And it was brought home to me when little Kathleen we came into Missouri and started seeing the first big cornfield. And she looked out the window and she said, "Tutu, look at all that floating cotton." And that's